Sean Diddy Combs' attorneys cross-examined his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura on day 4 of the hip-hop mogul's federal sex trafficking and racketeering trial. And we want to warn you, some may find the details in this report disturbing.
For decades, he ruled hip-hop like a king. Now, the courtroom is his kingdom no more. Once hailed as a titan of music and business, Sean Diddy Combs embodied power. The kind of power that didn't just open doors. It built empires. From Harlem hustler to global mogul, he orchestrated dreams, manufactured icons, and molded culture from the shadows. Bad Boy Records wasn't just a label, it was a movement. The shiny suits, the billboard hits, the lavish parties in Manhattan penthouses and Miami yachts. It all fed into the myth of a man who seemed invincible. But today, that myth is shattering. Disclaimer: the content of this video is for informational and commentary purposes only. All allegations mentioned are based on publicly available reports, legal filings, and news coverage as of the time of production. No statements made in this video should be interpreted as verified fact unless otherwise confirmed by a court of law. Sean Diddy Combs has denied the allegations discussed herein, and he is presumed innocent until proven otherwise. This video does not intend to defame, libel, or maliciously harm any individual or entity mentioned. The creators of this content do not claim to have first-hand knowledge of the events described and are not offering legal conclusions. Viewer discretion is advised. Instead of private jets and red carpets, Diddy now faces something far more sobering: a federal courtroom, a team of prosecutors, and a woman stepping forward with a story that threatens to unravel everything he built. Cassie Ventura, known to the public as the model, singer, and longtime girlfriend who once stood by his side at glamorous events, has returned. But this time, she's not on his arm. She's on the witness stand. And the power she now wields? It comes not from association with mogul, but from the truth, raw, unfiltered, and finally spoken aloud. Before we get to her testimony, we have to understand the silence. For over a decade, Cassie was an enigma. To some, she was simply Diddy's muse, beautiful, poised, but often wordless in the public eye. Her 2006 breakout single, Me and You, introduced her as a rising star, but her musical career never quite took off. Rumors swirled that Diddy was holding her back, controlling her trajectory, keeping her close, but never too powerful. Behind the glitz, whispers persisted. Industry insiders spoke of uncomfortable dynamics, sudden cancellations, abrupt changes to her creative projects. To fans, it felt like her light dimmed just as it was starting to shine. But Cassie never publicly explained. Not during the height of their relationship. Not after it ended. Until now. Courtroom 4C in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York was overflowing on the second day of the trial. Reporters filled the benches. Legal analysts hunched over laptops, and spectators, some of them celebrities in sunglasses and hats, lined the back. Everyone was there for one reason: to hear Cassie speak. She walked in slowly but deliberately, her stride unwavering. Wearing a form-fitting cocoa brown dress and modest heels, she wasn't dressed to perform. She was dressed for war. Her expression was calm, almost too calm. But there was something in her eyes. A quiet storm. Years of silence, finally ready to explode. The room was electric. Even before she opened her mouth, you could feel the weight of the moment. A woman once defined by whispers was about to speak in a voice that could shake the entire culture. Cassie's voice was steady but low as she began. Her attorney had warned the court beforehand that her testimony would include disturbing details, descriptions of coercion, manipulation, violence, and psychological abuse. Still, few were prepared for the depth of what she revealed. She started with the early days. When I met Sean, she said, I thought he was larger than life. He made me feel like I had finally arrived, like I was special. She paused. But over time, that feeling started to change. He didn't just want to be part of my life. He wanted to control it, every part of it. Who I talked to, where I went, what I wore, what I said, and eventually even how I saw myself. Her words fell like a hammer. Every sentence carried years of buried emotion. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. The details got darker. Cassie described nights where she was allegedly forced to stay in hotel rooms for days at a time, where her phone was taken away, and where surveillance was so constant She began to doubt her own sanity. She described a cycle of affection and cruelty, generosity followed by punishment, gifts and threats, luxury and isolation. He would fly me out in private jets, put me in 5-star hotels, buy me the most expensive jewelry, and then accuse me of being ungrateful or of disrespecting him. And when he got angry, really angry, he'd break things, scream, threaten people. And eventually, it wasn't just the objects around me he was breaking. She looked down at her hands, then back up. It was me. A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge gave her a moment. The jury, composed of 7 women and 5 men, watched her closely, not just hearing her words, but absorbing her pain. Cassie wasn't just testifying against Diddy the man. She was testifying against Diddy the myth, the untouchable mogul, the gatekeeper, the brand. She spoke about the fear of speaking out in an industry that rewards silence and punishes truth-telling. People told me not to say anything. They said no one would believe me, that he was too powerful, that if I spoke up, my career would be over. And for a long time, I believed them. The prosecution followed Cassie's testimony with evidence, text messages, financial documents, and security footage that allegedly corroborated her timeline. Several former employees of Diddy were also subpoenaed to testify later in the trial, including a former bodyguard who claims he was told to handle things discreetly when Cassie tried to leave him in 2017. But it was Cassie's words that painted the picture most vividly. She didn't just recount what happened. She made the courtroom feel it. She's not just a witness. One legal analyst whispered to a producer outside the courtroom. She's a turning point. Diddy's defense team sat stone-faced throughout the testimony. Lead attorney Jonathan Weiss objected multiple times, calling the testimony prejudicial and emotionally manipulative. But the judge overruled most of the objections, allowing Cassie to continue uninterrupted. "We are confident," Weiss said during a break, "that when the full picture is presented, the jury will see that these accusations are exaggerated, inconsistent, and ultimately untrue." But many in the courtroom weren't so sure. The emotional force of Cassie's words couldn't be easily dismissed. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was immediate. News vans clogged the street. Protesters held signs, some in support of Cassie, others defending Diddy. Online, a cultural reckoning began. Hashtags like hashtag I stand with Cassie and hashtag surviving Diddy started trending globally. Other women began to speak out, anonymously at first, claiming similar experiences. A former backup dancer, a studio assistant, even a former artist once signed a bad boy posted a cryptic message. The things we survived would break most people. The walls were closing in. At the end of her testimony, the prosecution asked Cassie what finally gave her the strength to come forward. She looked at the jury and said, "I realized no one was coming to save me, so I had to save myself. And maybe, just maybe, by telling the truth, I can save someone else too." The courtroom was dead silent. No one moved. No one breathed. And in that moment, the illusion shattered.
The defense focused on text messages between Ventura and Combs. The 38-year-old singer also talked about the couple's drug use during their time together. The judge has told the defense to wrap up its cross-examination by Friday afternoon because Ventura's attorneys are concerned she may give birth. Combs has pleaded not guilty in this case and faces up to life in prison if convicted. CBS News national correspondent Jerika Duncan was inside the courtroom in New York City. Jerika?
Yeah, the defense opened their questioning by saying you and Sean Combs were in love for 11 years and you believed he needed someone to take care of him. Is that correct? At which point Ventura said, "At times, yes, I did." Most of the testimony today was spent rehashing previous testimony, but also putting in exhibits that show Cassie Ventura was a participating person in these freak-offs. Many times the defense would ask her if she wrote these text messages or emails, which she did confirm, and it showed sort of times where she was getting supplies for the freak-offs or saying she was excited about them. There were also several explicit messages, which we can't even share with you, but essentially she described saying things like, "I can't wait to do certain things with certain people outside of Sean Combs."
The man who once stood at the top of an empire was no longer cloaked in invincibility. He was just another man, sitting at a defense table, watching a woman he once controlled reclaim her power in the most public, irreversible way. This wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. He once mastered boardrooms and arenas, but the courtroom, that was a stage he couldn't own. But inside the courtroom, that smooth, controlled exterior began to buckle. And for those watching closely, it wasn't just surprising, it was surreal. For over 2 decades, Sean Diddy Combs built his empire on 2 things: control and charisma. He could dominate any room, flip bad press into billion-dollar branding, and bury stories before they ever saw light. But now, the spotlight wasn't his to shape. It was Cassie Ventura's. And all the while, Diddy sat just feet away, his face a portrait of internal collapse. Legal analysts noted it first. He's not in control here, one said. He's reacting. Fidgeting became frequent. He scribbled furiously on a legal pad, sometimes so aggressively that his attorneys gently placed a hand on his arm. One even reportedly whispered, "Let us handle it." His trademark smirk absent, his confidence fading. One courtroom artist captured a moment that would go viral. Diddy hunched forward, hands clasped, staring at the floor as Cassie's attorney read out explicit details of alleged abuse. He mouthed denials, shook his head, but not to a camera, to a jury. The man who once ran empires with BlackBerry and a bad boy persona now seemed cornered by something far more powerful than the press: sworn testimony. Outside the courtroom, the world still spun, but the headlines shifted. Diddy silent as Cassie testifies. Control no more. Inside the mogul's legal meltdown. Power versus truth. A trial of icons. Inside the courtroom, a different story was being written. One observer, a journalist covering celebrity trials for over 20 years, said, "I've seen movie stars fake confidence. CEOs rehearse body language. But this was different. Diddy wasn't performing anymore. He was unraveling. Because this wasn't just about one woman's story. It was about an empire built on silence being shaken by one voice. For years, Diddy had the money, the fame, the legal teams, the influence. But now, he didn't even have a narrative, because for the first time, someone else was writing it, and the world was watching. Social media exploded with side-by-side images. Diddy on red carpets, arms raised. Diddy in court, shoulders slumped. The mask had cracked, and once a mask cracks in court, it's hard to ever wear it again. This isn't just about one case. Brands are watching. Executives are whispering. Contracts are being reviewed, because reputation is currency in entertainment. And right now, Diddy's stock, it's plummeting. In the courtroom, he faces possible legal consequences. But in the court of public opinion, the verdict may already be shifting. One culture writer summed it up bluntly. Diddy spent 30 years building a myth. Cassie needed 3 hours to fracture it.
So that said, what are some of the biggest hurdles you see for the prosecution to overcome when it comes to proving this was part of a criminal enterprise?
Well, Lindsay, this is the problem, is that this conduct that we've heard about is horrific, but what he's being charged with is this RICO, criminal enterprise. And we haven't really heard that yet. This is an enterprise of one person doing this for his own gratification. Even his employees that assisted him in this, it's alleged to have abused them also. So it's not like he's running a prostitution ring or profiting off of this. He was doing it for his own gratification. And I think that's where the jurors are going to have trouble with, and saying, how does that conduct, which we all would think is horrible and feel sorry for Casey and the other victims, but how does that really constitute running a criminal enterprise?
All right, Chris Melcher, we really appreciate it. Thank you.